I understand the point he is trying to make,
So let's
but
just
I think it.
recap for listeners
Sure,
essentially
sure.
that what he was essentially, and said you can fill in as well, but
Of
he
course.
was looking at sort of the knockabout comedy in Airplane and making a case for that still standing up today because of the element of surprise and because of the jokes essentially being sort of a victimless crime. I mean, I saw it. I mean, Airplane's been repeated a lot recently, and there are sort of sequences where they are just so bonkers and over the top that it does kind of it goes past it tries to go past offence essentially. But you've
Mhm.
got the two characters who are talking in jive, and then the white lady who's translating for them. That was one of the examples that he mentions in the piece. I mean, he didn't mention the sort of skit where they're queuing up to sort of shut that woman up, which is all slapstick violence. But I mean, I couldn't see anyone doing that today. And the piece is essentially about Airplane. It doesn't quite say Airplane wouldn't get made today, but that's essentially, I suppose, what it is saying, isn't it?
Right, that is what he's saying. I and it goes back to two things. One, it goes back to the fact that social media is not real life. So people complaining on Twitter does not mean the majority of people wouldn't probably still like Airplane today. Airplane is a very silly movie. At the same time, some of this is because people who were previously voiceless, who when Airplane came out probably were not comfortable with these scenes, the new generation versions of them are empowered to speak out about shit like this.
Yeah.
So when they see a scene where 30 people line up to hit a woman, they don't view it from the context of a middle class, safe, suburban way of going, oh, this is clearly absurd. They go, people are hitting women a lot in real life. And so I would like to bring up that it's weird that we're using this as comedy right now when it's just a real shit that, like, it's not absurd if it's happening in real life, basically.
Yeah.
Those people are now empowered to speak up. They can be annoying as hell. I'm a comedian. I like the silly stuff. They can be annoying as hell. It doesn't mean they're wrong. You know?
That's a lot. I like that's a really sanguine take on it, Sid, and I think that's really important. I mean, actually, David Zucker has a phrase in this piece. He calls them the 9%ers because I think is it 9% of people who are on social media in the US. And I mean, I've had figures like I keep looking at the Twitter percentages, and I'm never quite sure where it's resting. Um, but yeah, I mean, they are in that arena. Those voices obviously now sort of augmented, and there is often a kernel of there's always a sort of kernel of truth in terms of the statistics, for example. So you can look at domestic abuse statistics. You can't deny that it's happening, and you can't deny that the basics of sort of violence are inherent in that joke. I mean, people even talk about Punch and Judy shows in that sort of context. Um, but it's interesting because even though it's maybe sort of disparate voices or lone voices or voices that are now newly empowered because of the social media platforms, they seem to have a very an inordinate amount of power. They're flexing an incredible amount of power.
But that's because we choose to believe that they represent the world. They don't. They represent a part of the world.
Mm.
One of the things I wish also was given more weight in these discussions is the context that comedy requires. You know, we often talk about the context that should be given to the people who are watching this, disagreeing with whether they be from the right wing or the left wing. But we never talk about the evolution of comedy itself and the right to look at this art form as an ever evolving piece where it's okay to cringe at things made 40 years ago. It was made 40 years ago. We now have 40 years more of context and information to inform our watching of those scenes, which were never intended to have that much more information, being put in it.